Hello, Monetization Nation. Welcome back to another episode with Christoph Trappe. In the last episode, we discussed how to start live streaming. In today's episode, we're going to dive deeper and get specific with 6 steps we can take to start live streaming. So why is live streaming taking off so much today?
Well, first of all, I think, companies are looking for ways to stand out. In theory, it is fairly easy to produce if you think about it. I mean, I can go live, in a couple of minutes if I want to. There's more involved, the more, the pickier you get about what you want your content to be and what your goals are, of course. But all these networks have that functionality, right? I mean, pretty much every major network you can go live on: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I can't think of any others right now, but all the main ones basically allow you to go live. So I think it's another opportunity to reach people.
Why are people tuning in to live streams so much? Why are they taking off just with not what is the benefit to me, but what is the benefit for the end user in consuming a live stream?
Well, I mean, obviously, either knowledge or entertainment, or sometimes it's just running in the background. Why are people tuning into podcasts? Same thing. They like the show, it's entertaining, or they're learning something new, or it might be a sports podcast. Sometimes they just stumble across it, and they're seeing something new, or it's, somebody they want to hear from. So it's the same concept as for any other content piece, really.
So give me a rough proportional estimate, like roughly how many listeners do you have per episode on your podcast? And then when you go live and do a live stream, roughly how many people consume the live stream? Are you getting more off the live stream or more off the podcast?
I think in general, what I found is when companies start a podcast, they get 20 to 60 downloads, maybe if they're lucky, maybe even 10 to 40. Right, when they first start, because it's a brand new network. But when they also live stream to their social channels, they can expect hundreds, maybe even in the thousands of viewers, because number one, they already have the audience. Number two, algorithms currently favor live streams on LinkedIn and all those different channels. So I think that's a very, very common kind of metric to look at when you first start. On all the different channels. And I think, it helps you bring back the value of having a podcast type kind of content that you're sharing, because that's really what it is, right? Whether you're going live or not, it's just a podcast live. And a lot of times when I do them, I really just brand them as the business. Welcome to another episode of the Business Storytelling Podcast, recording live. I mean, that's really how I brand it, So, but yeah, that's kind of how I would think about it. And especially if you're into the podcast game, your leaders will not be happy with 20 downloads. Promise. So I don't care if it's a niche industry, even, it's not very many.
We can get an exponentially larger number of people participating and consuming our content if we do them live as well. Okay. And you're saying that is greatly a factor of the platforms are preferencing live. So whether or not the users prefer live, just the fact that we're doing it live, the platforms are going to promote us more.
They do. And even think about Amazon, for example. Amazon is putting live streams on the product pages, right? So even when somebody goes shopping, they might see a live stream. They didn't come to Amazon to watch a live stream, but it happens to be there, right, while they're shopping. And now they tune in and they ask a question or they see what's going on. Same on LinkedIn. I mean, how many people go to LinkedIn and say, oh, I want to watch a live stream? They're on LinkedIn for some whatever reason they're on there for. And now they see a live stream in their feed and they're like, oh, interesting. Or now LinkedIn is doing different things to promote live streams. So for example, when I go live on LinkedIn, on the top of my profile, it shows the live feed. It's super cool, like where the banner is typically, it switches that out and has the live feed of my live broadcast. So again, somebody comes to my profile, they might see it. I don't know how many people go there, quite honestly, at any given time, hundreds, I suppose. But my point is, these networks are trying to figure out how can they engage people and keep them on those networks. And that's currently one way to do it.
If a brand is deciding they want to take their podcast and start making it live and do their live stream, what should brands be thinking about? What's the best advice you can give them? And what are the biggest mistakes that they need to be avoiding?
The biggest mistake, honestly, forget about perfection. 100 things can happen. I'll give you an example. When I do a live stream, here's how I produce them. I produce them on my iPad on Switcher Studio. My guests come into Switcher from wherever they're coming from, right? Then Switcher goes to Restream. Then Restream goes to all the different networks. And it's a never, there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall. So keep that in mind. Something will go wrong. And you just kind of have to roll with it. You have to kind of figure out your workflow. And I think that's the biggest mistake that a lot of people, we want to be perfect. And in this world, it's so hard to be perfect, if not impossible. So you just kind of have to roll with it, and go with the flow. Something isn't working, you just go, oh, hey, are you gone? Are you frozen? Whatever, nobody cares. My dog, I don't even have a dog, but if I had a dog, my dog walks through, nobody cares anymore. It's not a big deal. So just kind of be human and keep that in mind. I think that would probably be my biggest advice, other than all the technical things. How do you start? Should you look at the camera? Should you look at the person? Where do you put your mic? Those kind of things.
Okay, so I'm hosting a live cast. I'm finally doing it, took the leap. What advice do you have for me on hosting that? Questions about interviewing or preparing for the interviews, or how do I keep it fun and entertaining? Those kinds of things.
So I'm a big believer in that. I'm just not here to interview people as the host, right? I want to have a conversation. And sometimes that's very different, because some guests, they think I'm just the interviewer, right? But I want to have a chat. And even when you listen to Neil Schaefer or the Nerd Brand podcast, where it's 3 hosts and they all have a conversation, think of it that way. How are you going to have an interesting conversation? How are you going to ask questions when it makes sense? How do you share your own stories? And here's the other thing. When you start sharing stories, again, now we're talking about failure again to an extent. Sometimes people will disagree with your stories. I had a lawyer on my show once, and I said, here's what I do when it comes to permission on podcasts. And he said, it might be fine, but you're not a lawyer. Here's how I would recommend to do it. And so I'm like, okay, interesting, cool, good to know. So it's okay to not always agree. It's okay to, don't be a jerk, but, to have a good conversation. And I think that can be hard sometimes, because, very few of us are trained in feeling okay when we're not right. We won't be like, oh yeah, oh Nathan, I agree with you. Yeah, that makes sense. Very few people say, that was a great debate. Oh my goodness, we didn't agree on some stuff and that was fun. So it's just something to think about. Where do you find that right balance and that fine line?
I'm looking through the chapter in your book, this Going Live book, about making live streams easier. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have about simplifying this process and making it a little easier?
Well, first of all, you need to do a test run. And you know how you test a live stream? You go live. I mean, seriously, you just do a test live stream. And I did one the other day, had more viewers than the actual live streams, So it's interesting because, and we were just hanging out. We were like, oh, cool. This is working. That's working. Okay. Are we there? Yep. Cool. And then people were like, yep, it's working on Twitter. Yep. It's working on YouTube. Yep. It's working on wherever, so something to keep in mind, test it, try things, just do it. I mean, it's really the only way to be successful. And here's the thing. My first few podcast episodes were horrible. My first few live stream episodes were horrible. It's okay. We all grow as we move forward. The first Real Talk, the customer insight show that we didn't even have the opening music, it was just me on voiceover live, talking, having the intro. So, just kind of evolve as you're going, get better as you're going. And I think that's hard for some people because they want to start on day 400 or 800 of somebody who's done it for a while, right? And not start on day one.
Okay, guests or no guests?
It's a fantastic question. And as you can see in the book, there's a whole section in it. I do both kinds. I do with guests, and I also do just solo ones. Some of my highest performing podcast episodes actually have been just me talking, and then also about certain topics. And then also some of the guest ones are certainly up there as well. I find them much easier when you have a guest because you have a conversation. You can play off each other. I mean, think about it this way. How much harder would it be for you to do an hour show by yourself? A lot harder, right? Like you don't just ask questions, you have to have the questions and the answers. So, and then your own stories, right? And there's no other stories. And the other thing is, as we're talking, right, we get ideas based on what the other person says too. So I think it's more fun when you have a guest. And also when you have good guests, it's also, there's some networking involved. People now know you. Of course, everybody has their opinions anyways. So we might as well get used to it. And people will have that as well when you invite them in your live streams. But I've met all kinds of awesome people I've never met in person. I had Seth Godin on my podcast, Scott Brinker, Barry Schwartz, Christina Podnar, all kinds of people, And it's also a great networking tool by just inviting people on your show.
How'd you get Seth Godin on?
I emailed him and said, Seth, you want to come on my podcast? And Seth says, awesome. Yeah, when?
How many listeners do you have to your podcast?
So it all depends. But I mean, I've had shows, 40,000 downloads. I think overall the current number might be 250,000, just shy of that total downloads. So it all depends. I haven't actually done the math recently for an episode overall. I bet it's in the thousands. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, congratulations. That's amazing. Headphones or no headphones?
Oh, that's a good question. So I just use the computer speakers, and that works for me. Now, if you're asking if you should monitor your own audio while you're on the live stream, that's a different question. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but I'll answer that one. I would not. I've tried that before. It's horrible. You know what I'm talking about? Like you can hear yourself talk. It's just, I literally just got a headache just like thinking about it. So I wouldn't do that. I would monitor like the little sound bars, like make sure the sound is working. I can't do that right here. And so I'm trusting Nathan that it's working on his end. But if I'm doing a show and I don't hear myself, I'm looking at the sound bar so I can see them in Switcher, for example. And of course I hear my guests, so I can tell whether that's coming through. And I don't know why else you would need headphones. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend them for audio monitoring unless you're the producer, then it's a good idea. And you're not on air.
Yeah. What have been the most effective ways to repurpose content?
I really think all these platforms make it super easy for you. I'll give you an example. So when I do a live stream, I do Switcher to Restream. I already mentioned that. And then both of those platforms actually save the video. So the easiest way a lot of times is what I do is I'm on my iPad. I take the video, push it into Google Drive, and then take it from there. Like that's almost automatic. Not quite, but as close as you can get without being automatic. And then I grab it and I push it into Anchor. Anchor automatically, Anchor.fm, they automatically now extract the audio. So I used to have to go through another service to get the audio. And on Restream, you can actually download the audio only, which I could do too. That might be easier. I don't know. But Anchor extracts the audio, and then the audio is right there in Anchor, and I can edit it. So I usually edit out the beginning. Sometimes, we have chit chat that has no value to a podcast audience at all. I edit that out pretty quickly, or then I go through the whole show. But it's super easy, and I've realized how it has evolved because I had a guest on a show and he said, "Can I record this?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure you can. But if you want the video, I'll send it to you when we're done." And he goes, "Yeah, it's just going to take too much time." I'm like, we're going to be done at 9:00, and I'm literally going to send it to you at 9:03, because I will just give you access to that same Google Drive file that I'm going to use to move it into Anchor. So but I know where he's coming from, because 15 years ago, he would have never gotten the video that quickly.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, what do you recommend is the best way to engage with the audience while you're doing your live stream?
That's an interesting question. First of all, don't have too high of expectations to get any kind of comments from the audience. But all these networks, they do allow you to show the comments on screen. So what I do is, when I get comments, I show them on the screen. For example, if I'm in Restream or Switcher too, I show them, and then I respond to them. I'm just like they're on air. And sometimes I say, oh, I don't know what that means. Can you clarify, or whatever. But I do mention them. I say, Amanda Milligan, by the way, who has the Cashing In on Content Marketing podcast, here's her question. So I reference them, so I can use them on the live and the podcast if it makes sense, right? And a lot of times it does make sense, because they're asking a question about what you're talking about. Some people, Ross Brand has a gazillion people on his live stream, and he says hi to all kinds of people. He's like, oh, hi, and he says their name, which I don't know if that has value on the podcast for people just listening, but it's kind of on the live stream for people just listening, but it's kind of nice. Yeah. It definitely has no value on the podcast. You know what I mean? Like, you just got to cut that out. So keep that in mind. Think about, does this comment have value on the podcast? Keep it in. If it doesn't, take it out. I also mentioned where the comment is coming from. So like the Amanda example, I might say, oh, Amanda is chiming in on LinkedIn, blah, 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 so people know. So I'm kind of promoting my live streams at the same time. I don't know that people go back and forth. I don't think the LinkedIn audience goes to my podcast. I don't think the podcast audience goes to LinkedIn. I don't think it works like that. But for anybody that wants to, every once in a while I do mention it.
You've mentioned Amazon live streaming several times, and I'm actually not familiar at all with that. Can you give us a little bit of a background and, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
So basically, you have to apply to be an Amazon influencer, and then you can live stream, and there's different levels. Based on your level, they allow you to stream to different places, all the way up to the Amazon.com homepage, which is kind of cool if you think about it. It's like the, 7th most visited website in the United States, right? It's in the top 10 for sure. And you really should be talking about products. But sometimes if I live stream my podcast, I might have a different angle, not just this really close up of me, but I might show my studio so you can see all the different equipment I have. And then people can buy my chair, even though I'm standing right now, or my Veridesk, or my monitor, or my camera, or my microphone. So it's kind of like, it's almost like product placement if you follow that model, right? Other people, right, they just talk about products. I just got a Wi-Fi extender, and I love it. It's awesome. I didn't think I had a Wi-Fi problem, quite frankly, down here, but it's awesome. So I might do a whole show, talk about how to set up the Wi-Fi extender, why I got it, how it works, where do you put it, and it's kind of like an infomercial.
Yeah. Okay. So it works best if I'm trying to sell physical products. If I'm a vendor of courses or coaching services or something, it wouldn't be probably the best fit for me.
Probably not. But the products need to be on Amazon, right? So a lot of times, yes. I also use it as another channel just to reach more people. So for example, I had Julian Hayes on the Business Storytelling podcast, who doesn't sell anything on Amazon, but he does have a podcast. So I can highlight his podcast. I'm not going to make any money on people clicking on his podcast, right? Because you can listen for free, but it's another channel for me to reach more people, and I can promote his podcast. I can have a link to my podcast, can have a link to my books. So there's other ways to think about using it as well, versus like truly just the sales perspective. But
right.
But the sales perspective certainly has, there's value in that as well.
So LinkedIn is interesting because if you're posting video up on LinkedIn, you can only post 10 minutes of video up. But you're saying you can do an hour-long live stream and LinkedIn will accept it.
First of all, LinkedIn tells you that you shouldn't go live for less than 15 minutes. Maybe it's 20.
Interesting.
And then, yeah, I don't know what the time limit is. I should actually test that one day and just live stream myself working, and I'm like, AMA, ask me any questions. So I should try that. I don't know. The longest I've ever gone live probably was 4 hours, and that was on Amazon. So I don't know what the upper limit is, but I've never had a stream shut down on LinkedIn. They've never said, oh, you reached the limit. I don't know if there is one. Others do have one. Instagram, I think it's like an hour maybe.
Thank you so much, Christoph, for sharing your stories and insights with us today. Here's some of my key takeaways from this episode. Number 1, live streaming provides an easy way to stand out and reach more people. Number 2, live streaming can provide education or entertainment for viewers. Number 3, live streams often attract more viewers than a recorded episode because of the algorithms on popular platforms that preference live streaming content. Number 4, we shouldn't pressure ourselves to be perfect. We can just do our best and improve as we go. Number 5, the only way to test a live stream is to do a live stream. The test or our first few streams might not be perfect, but that's okay. Number 6, guests can be a great way to make a live stream more natural. Inviting guests can also be a great way to network and reach more people. Number 7, we should treat live streams as a conversation to help the show feel more real and authentic. Number 8, we can engage our audience by greeting viewers and responding to comments and questions. Number 9, repurposing content is a great way to optimize our time and still share knowledge with users from different platforms. To learn more about or connect with Christoph, you can find him on LinkedIn or visit his website at authenticstorytelling.net. And there's links to both of those sites in the blog post for this episode at monetizationnation.com. You can also get my free ebook about passion marketing and learn how to become a top priority of your ideal customers at passionmarketing.com. You can also subscribe to Monetization Nation on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, our Facebook group, and on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for joining me for this episode. I wish you success in your live streaming.
Do you want to become a better digital monetizer? To receive great monetization stories and secrets, please go to monetizationnation.com and join free. And if you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the show and share it.